The first thing Zara Williams learned about saving lives was that death had a smell, metallic, sweet, and unmistakable. The second thing she learned was that sometimes, trying to save someone could get you killed. At 2:17 a.m. on a rain-slicked Tuesday in downtown Detroit, she discovered both truths would collide in the most dangerous way possible. Zara's worn sneakers splashed through puddles as she hurried down Woodward Avenue, her scrubs still damp with perspiration from a brutal 12-hour shift at Detroit General. The nursing program at Wayne State was bleeding her dry, literally and financially, but every grueling hour in those sterile hallways brought her closer to her dream. Every dollar earned tonight would go toward next semester's tuition, toward the future her mother never lived to see. The street lamps cast sickly yellow pools of light through the October drizzle, and Zara pulled her thin jacket tighter against the chill. Her one-bedroom apartment was still 6 blocks away, but she'd learned to move fast through these streets after dark. Head down, earbuds in, invisible. That's when she heard it, a low, guttural moan echoing from the narrow alley between Miller's pawn shop and the abandoned storefront that used to be Chen's Market. Zara's steps faltered. Every instinct screamed at her to keep walking, to mind her own business. This was Detroit at 2 a.m., nothing good happened in dark alleys. But the sound came again, weaker this time, desperate. Help. The word was barely a whisper, but it cut through the rain and traffic noise like a blade. Zara's nursing training overrode her street smarts, and she found herself turning toward the alley, her hand already reaching for her phone's flashlight. "Hello?" she called softly, stepping into the shadows. "Is someone there?" The LED beam swept across overflowing dumpsters and broken glass before landing on a figure crumpled against the brick wall. Her breath caught. It was a young man, maybe her age, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His dark hair was matted with blood, and his expensive-looking shirt was torn and stained. A Rolex, an actual Rolex, glinted on his wrist as his hand twitched weakly. Oh my God. Zara dropped to her knees beside him, her training taking over. She checked his pulse, thready but steady, and gently tilted his head to examine the wound. Blood seeped from a jagged gash above his left temple, but it wasn't arterial. He'd live, if she could get him help fast enough. "Can you hear me?" She touched his shoulder gently. "What's your name?" His eyelids fluttered, revealing unfocused green eyes. His voice was thick, confused. "What happened?" "You're hurt." "I'm going to call 911. "No." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "No hospitals. Please." Zara frowned. This was classic head injury behavior: confusion, disorientation, poor judgment. "You need medical attention. You could have a concussion, internal bleeding." "My phone." He struggled to sit up, wincing. "Call my dad. He'll handle this." Against her better judgment, Zara helped him search his jacket pockets until she found an iPhone with a spider web crack across the screen. It was still functional, and when she swiped it open, she saw hundreds of missed calls and messages. "What's your father's number?" Just press dad. Speed dial." Zara found the contact and hit call. It rang once before a crisp, authoritative voice answered. "Marcus? Jesus Christ, where are you? I've had half the city looking." "This isn't Marcus," Zara interrupted. "I found him injured in an alley downtown. He needs help." The silence stretched for several heartbeats. When the voice returned, it was controlled, calculating. "Who is this?" "My name is Zara Williams. I'm a nursing student. Your son has a head injury and... What's your exact location?" Something in his tone made her skin crawl. No panic, no parental concern, just cold efficiency. "Woodward Avenue, between Miller's Pawn and..." "Don't move him. Don't call 911. Don't speak to anyone else. I'm sending people." The line went dead, leaving Zara staring at the cracked screen. Beside her, Marcus, if that was his name, had gone pale, his breathing shallow. "Your dad's coming," she said, trying to keep her voice reassuring. Everything's going to be okay. But Marcus grabbed her arm again, his green eyes suddenly sharp and focused despite the head trauma. When he spoke, his words sent ice through her veins. "Don't trust my father," he whispered, his grip desperate. "He did this to me." "What?" Zara leaned closer. "What are you talking about?" "The company, what he's doing. I found out, and Marcus's eyes rolled back, and he slumped against the wall. "Marcus." Zara checked his pulse again, more frantic now. Still steady, but he was unconscious. She needed to get him to a hospital, regardless of what his father had said. Head injuries were unpredictable. He could slip into a coma, develop brain swelling, die. She was reaching for her own phone to call 911 when the sound of engines filled the alley. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows screeched to a halt at the alley's mouth, their headlights creating harsh shadows on the brick walls. Car doors slammed. Heavy footsteps approached. "Miss Williams?" A tall man in an expensive suit stepped into view, flanked by 2 others who looked more like bodyguards than medical personnel. "I'm Richard Wellington. Thank you for finding my son." Even in the dim light, Zara could see the family resemblance, the same green eyes, the same strong jawline. But where Marcus had seemed vulnerable, broken, his father radiated cold power. Everything about him screamed money and influence, from his perfectly tailored coat to the way he commanded the space around him. "He needs a hospital," Zara said, standing protectively over Marcus. "He has a significant head injury and possible concussion." "We have our own medical facility," Wellington replied smoothly. "Much more private. Discreet." The 2 men moved past Wellington toward Marcus, and Zara noticed they were wearing tactical gear under their jackets. Not paramedics, security. "Wait." She stepped between them and Marcus. "I'm a trained nursing student. Moving him without proper spinal precautions could cause permanent damage." "And what did he mean about not trusting?" "Miss Williams." Wellington's voice cut through her protests like steel. "My son has a history of episodes. Paranoid delusions brought on by stress and substance abuse. Nothing he said should be taken seriously." But Zara had seen addiction, had seen mental health crises during her clinical rotations. This felt different. Marcus's fear had been real, specific. "He did this to me." In the distance, sirens began to wail. Someone must have called the police. Wellington's jaw tightened. "We need to leave. Now." "The police are coming," Zara said. "They'll want a report." "There won't be any report." Wellington nodded to his men, who efficiently lifted Marcus onto a stretcher they'd retrieved from one of the SUVs. "This is a private family matter." As they loaded Marcus into the middle SUV, Wellington turned back to Zara. In the harsh glare of the headlights, his smile was predatory. "Miss Williams, I want to thank you for your discretion tonight. I'm sure a nursing student could use some financial assistance." He pulled out a leather wallet and extracted a business card along with what looked like a very substantial check. $50,000, and all you have to do is forget this happened. Sign a simple confidentiality agreement. Your tuition problems disappear overnight. Zara stared at the check. $50,000. It was more money than she'd ever seen, enough to finish school without crushing debt, enough to finally breathe. But Marcus's words echoed in her mind. "Don't trust my father. He did this to me." The sirens were getting closer. "I can't," she said quietly. "If something happened to him, if someone hurt him." Wellington's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Miss Williams, sometimes the greatest kindness is knowing when not to ask questions." He pocketed the check and turned toward his vehicle. "Enjoy your evening. And Miss Williams? Be careful walking alone at night. Detroit can be very dangerous for young women." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Zara's blood chilled as the 3 SUVs pulled away, leaving her alone in the alley with the rain and the approaching sirens. When the police arrived 3 minutes later, they found her standing in an empty alley, staring at a business card that read, Richard Wellington, CEO, Wellington Technologies. And in the puddle where Marcus had been lying, a single drop of blood mixed with the rainwater and disappeared down the storm drain, as if he had never existed at all. Chapter 2. Zara's hands were still shaking when she finally made it to her apartment building 45 minutes later. The police had been polite but dismissive. No body, no blood evidence thanks to the rain, and Richard Wellington's business card meant nothing to two overworked Detroit cops dealing with their third assault call of the night. Probably just some rich kid who got jumped and daddy came to clean up the mess, Officer Martinez had said with a shrug. Happens more than you'd think. But it didn't feel that simple. Not with Marcus's terrified warning echoing in her head, not with the way his father had looked at her like she was a problem to be solved. Zara climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, her footsteps echoing in the narrow stairwell. The building was old, with thin walls and cheaper rent than anything decent in the area. Her next-door neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was playing her television too loud again, but the familiar sound was oddly comforting after the night she'd had. She fumbled with her keys, exhaustion hitting her like a wall. All she wanted was a hot shower and 8 hours of sleep before her morning pharmacology class. But as she pushed open her door, something nagged at her, a feeling that something was wrong. The apartment looked exactly as she'd left it. Textbooks stacked on the kitchen table, her uniform hanging on the bathroom door, the same pile of bills she'd been avoiding on the counter. Nothing disturbed. So why did her skin feel like it was crawling? Zara double-locked the door and checked the windows, drawing the curtains tight. Paranoia, she told herself. Wellington's veiled threat had rattled her more than she wanted to admit. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus's bloody face, heard his desperate whisper, "Don't trust my father." And underneath it all, a growing certainty that she'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than a simple mugging. When her alarm buzzed at 7 a.m., Zara felt like she'd been hit by a truck. 3 hours of fitful sleep wasn't enough to function on, but she had a test in pharmacology and couldn't afford to miss it. Every absence was money down the drain. She grabbed a quick shower and threw on jeans and a Wayne State sweatshirt, braiding her dark hair back in a simple plait. In the daylight streaming through her kitchen window, last night felt almost surreal. Had she really found a billionaire's son bleeding in an alley? Had his father really threatened her? The business card on her counter said yes. Wellington Technologies. The name sounded familiar, though she couldn't place where she'd heard it before. During her coffee break between classes, she'd do some research. But first, she needed to get through organic chemistry without falling asleep. The morning passed in a blur of molecular structures and reaction pathways. Zara managed to stay awake through Professor Martinez's lecture on beta blockers, but her mind kept drifting to Marcus. Was he okay? Where was this private medical facility his father had mentioned? During her 15-minute break, she pulled out her phone and typed Wellington Technologies into Google. The results made her stomach drop. Wellington Technologies was massive, a tech conglomerate with fingers in everything from medical devices to government contracts. The company's website featured glossy photos of cutting-edge laboratories and smiling executives, but it was the news articles that caught her attention. Wellington Tech awarded $500 million government contract for medical research initiative. Marcus Wellington III to take over family business, sources say. Wellington Technologies expands into neural interface development. But it was the fourth article that made her blood run cold. Marcus Wellington III missing for 3 days during European business trip, company spokesman says. The article was dated yesterday. According to Wellington Technologies' official statement, Marcus had been in London for high-level meetings with European investors and had apparently disappeared from his hotel 3 days ago. Private investigators had been hired, and the company was cooperating fully with international authorities. Zara stared at her phone screen, her coffee growing cold in her hands. 3 days ago, Marcus had been missing in London. But last night, she'd found him bleeding in a Detroit alley. Someone was lying. And given Richard Wellington's behavior, she had a pretty good idea who. The rest of her classes passed in a fog. During clinical skills lab, She went through the motions of taking vital signs and administering mock IVs, but her mind was spinning with questions. Why had Marcus really been in Detroit? What had he discovered about his father's company that was worth a beating, or worse? And why did Richard Wellington seem so determined to keep it quiet? After her last class, Zara headed to her part-time job at the campus bookstore. It was mindless work, restocking shelves, ringing up overpriced textbooks, but it paid enough to keep food on her table and gas in her ancient Honda Civic. She was arranging nursing textbooks on the medical section shelves when she first noticed him. A man in a dark suit, standing by the magazine rack, pretending to read a copy of Time while watching her work. When she looked directly at him, he turned away, but she could feel his attention like a weight on her shoulders. Paranoia, she told herself again. She was seeing threats where none existed. But when she looked up 10 minutes later, he was still there. And when she moved to the register to help a customer, he moved too, maintaining his line of sight. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharper than she intended. "Can I help you find something?" The man looked up from his magazine, the same page he'd been staring at for 20 minutes. "No, thank you," he said politely. "Just browsing." His voice was cultured, professional. Expensive, like his suit and his shoes and the way he carried himself. Nothing like the usual campus visitors. Zara's supervisor, Janet, appeared from the back office with a stack of invoices. "Problem, honey?" "No problem," the man said smoothly, placing the magazine back on the rack. "I was just leaving." He walked out of the bookstore with measured steps, but Zara saw him through the window, pulling out a phone and speaking into it as he crossed the quad. "Friend of yours?" Janet asked, following her gaze. "Never seen him before in my life." But that wasn't quite true. She'd seen men who looked like him, expensive suits, predatory eyes, the kind of casual menace that came with serious money and no conscience. They'd been standing behind Richard Wellington in that alley. The rest of her shift passed without incident, but Zara found herself checking the windows every few minutes, scanning faces in the bookstore, jumping at sudden movements. By closing time, her nerves were frayed to the breaking point. She walked to her car with keys ready, checking the back seat before she got in. The campus parking lot was well lit and busy with students heading to evening classes, but she still felt exposed, vulnerable. The drive home should have been routine, 15 minutes through familiar streets. But halfway there, Zara noticed the black sedan in her rearview mirror. It had been behind her when she left campus, maintaining a careful distance through 3 turns and 2 traffic lights. She took a right onto a residential street she didn't need, watching the mirror. The sedan followed. Left onto Maple Street. The sedan stayed with her. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she made a quick decision, pulling into the parking lot of a busy grocery store. The sedan drove past without slowing, but she caught a glimpse of the driver, another man in a dark suit, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast evening. Zara sat in her car for 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, before she felt safe enough to drive home. But even then, she took a circuitous route, doubling back twice to make sure she wasn't followed. By the time she reached her apartment building, darkness had settled over the city like a heavy blanket. She parked under a street light and hurried toward the entrance, keys ready. Mrs. Chen was in the lobby, checking her mail with arthritic fingers. The elderly woman looked up with a smile that faded when she saw Zara's expression. "You okay, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just a long day," Zara managed. "You?" "Can't complain. Though I did see some men in suits earlier, asking the super about different tenants. Probably insurance or something." Ice formed in Zara's chest. "What kind of questions?" "Oh, you know, who lived where, how long they'd been here, that sort of thing." They seemed particularly interested in the 3rd floor. Mrs. Chen's weathered face creased with concern. "That's your floor, isn't it, dear?" Zara nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. Did they go upstairs?" "I don't think so. The super's pretty strict about that sort of thing. But they were here for a while, looking at the building directory. They knew where she lived." The thought sent panic racing through her veins, but she forced herself to smile at Mrs. Chin. "Thanks for letting me know. Probably just some mix-up with my student loan company." But as she climbed the stairs to the third floor, every shadow seemed to hide a threat. The hallway was empty, her door exactly as she'd left it, but the feeling of wrongness was stronger now. Zara unlocked her apartment and stepped inside, immediately knowing something was different. The smell was wrong, not her usual scent of vanilla candles and coffee, but something else. Something masculine and expensive, like cologne. Her books were still stacked on the kitchen table, but not quite in the same order. The pile of bills had been moved slightly to the left. Her bathroom door was open when she always kept it closed. Someone had been here. Had been through her things with professional care, leaving almost no trace except for the subtle displacement that came from human presence. Zara's hands shook as she moved through the small apartment, checking for anything obviously missing. Her laptop was still on the desk, her jewelry box untouched, her emergency cash still hidden in the coffee can in her kitchen cabinet. They hadn't come to steal. They'd come to search. But for what? She was checking her bedroom closet when she saw it, a folded piece of paper on her pillow that definitely hadn't been there that morning. Heavy cream stationery, expensive. No envelope, no letterhead, just a message in elegant handwriting that made her blood freeze. "Some secrets are worth dying for." Zara stared at the note, her vision blurring with tears she refused to shed. She thought of Marcus's desperate warning, of his father's cold eyes, of the men who'd been following her all day. She was in over her head, drowning in something she didn't understand. But one thing was crystal clear, she was no longer just a witness to whatever had happened to Marcus Wellington. Now she was a target. If you are enjoying this video, do well to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 3. The threatening note sat on Zara's kitchen table like a coiled snake, its elegant script mocking her with every glance. She'd barely slept, jumping at every sound in the old building, Mrs. Chen's television, footsteps in the hallway, the settling of ancient pipes. By dawn, she'd made a decision that would have terrified her 48 hours ago. She was going to find Marcus Wellington. The plan was insane, reckless, and probably suicidal. But the alternative, living in fear, waiting for Richard Wellington's next move, felt like a slower death. If Marcus was the key to understanding what she'd stumbled into, then she needed to reach him before his father silenced them both. Wellington Technologies' private medical facility wasn't hard to find. A few strategic Google searches led her to Meridian Health Center, a gleaming glass building in Birmingham, one of Detroit's wealthiest suburbs. The website boasted exclusive medical care for discerning clients, with photos of spa-like rooms and smiling staff in pristine white coats. It looked more like a luxury hotel than a hospital, which probably suited Richard Wellington just fine. Zara spent the morning crafting her approach. She couldn't just walk in asking for Marcus, that would trigger every alarm in the building. But she could leverage her nursing background, her knowledge of medical terminology and procedures. She drove to the facility just after noon, when the lunch hour shift changes would create the most chaos. Her hands were steady as she parked her battered Honda between a Mercedes and a BMW, but her heart hammered against her ribs. The lobby was everything she'd expected, all marble and soft lighting, with the kind of hushed atmosphere that screamed expensive. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers, and the reception desk looked like it belonged in a five-star hotel. "Good afternoon," Zara said to the receptionist, a polished woman in her 30s who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. "I'm Zara Williams from the Wayne State Nursing Program. I'm here for my clinical rotation with Dr. Hendricks." It was a calculated gamble. Most private facilities worked with local nursing schools, and Dr. Hendricks was a common enough name that it might exist somewhere in the building's directory. The receptionist frowned at her computer screen. "I don't see you on today's schedule." "Oh no," Zara said, letting panic creep into her voice. "Please tell me I didn't mix up the dates again. Professor Martinez will kill me if I miss another rotation." She pulled out her phone, pretending to check a calendar. "It's supposed to be the neuro ward, 3rd floor." The woman's expression softened with sympathy. "Let me call up to the nurses' station and see if they're expecting anyone." Zara held her breath as the receptionist made the call, speaking in low, professional tones. After what felt like an eternity, she hung up. They're a bit understaffed today, so they'd welcome the extra help. Take the elevator to the 3rd floor and ask for Nurse Patterson. She'll get you sorted. Thank you so much, Zara said, accepting a temporary visitor badge with shaking hands. You're a lifesaver. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt like ascending to her own execution. Every second, she expected security guards to appear, dragging her out in handcuffs. But the doors opened to reveal a typical hospital floor, long corridors lined with patient rooms, the familiar antiseptic smell, the quiet hum of medical equipment. A plump, middle-aged nurse approached with a smile. You must be our student. I'm Linda Patterson. Ready to jump right in? For the next hour, Zara followed Nurse Patterson on her rounds, taking vital signs and helping with basic patient care. It was surreal, acting normal while her mind raced with the dangerous game she was playing. But it also felt good to use her training, to help people who needed care. She was checking blood pressure on an elderly man recovering from hip surgery when she heard a familiar voice in the hallway. How is he today? Any improvement in the memory issues? Richard Wellington's crisp tones made every muscle in Zara's body tense. She forced herself to continue with the blood pressure cuff, keeping her back to the doorway while straining to hear the conversation. Some confusion still, Nurse Patterson replied. The head trauma was significant, but the scans show no permanent damage. Dr. Morrison thinks the memory gaps will resolve with time. And visitors? Has he asked about anyone? Just general questions about family. Nothing specific. Good. Let me know immediately if that changes. Footsteps moved away down the hall, and Zara released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Marcus was here, somewhere on this floor, and he was alive. The memory gaps were concerning. Were they a natural result of his injuries, or something more deliberate? Are you all right, dear? The elderly patient asked, studying her face with concern. You look pale. Just a long day, Zara managed, finishing with his blood pressure. Everything looks good, Mr. Foster. I'll let Nurse Patterson know. For the next 20 minutes, she helped with routine tasks while mapping the floor in her mind. The ward was laid out in a U-shape, with a nurse's station at the center and patient rooms along both wings. Security was light. This was a medical facility, not a prison, but she noticed cameras at key intervals. During a brief lull, Nurse Patterson stepped away to handle a medication issue, leaving Zara alone at the nurse's station. Heart pounding, she quickly scanned the patient board behind the desk. There it was, room 314, M. Wellington. Admitted 2 days ago for head trauma and observation. Zara glanced around the floor. Most of the staff were busy with afternoon procedures, and the hallway was temporarily empty. It might be her only chance. Room 314 was at the far end of the left wing, away from the main traffic flow. Zara walked purposefully down the corridor, carrying a chart she'd grabbed from the nurse's station. If anyone questioned her, she was just checking on a patient. The door was slightly ajar. She knocked softly and pushed it open. Marcus was sitting by the window, staring out at the manicured grounds below. He looked better than he had in the alley, clean, bandaged, wearing expensive pajamas instead of blood-stained clothes. But there was something empty in his expression, a blankness that made her chest tighten. Marcus, she said softly, stepping into the room. He turned, and for a moment she saw no recognition in his green eyes. Then something shifted, and he frowned. I know you, he said slowly. You were there, in the alley. You called for help. Relief flooded through her. Yes. I'm Zara Williams. How are you feeling? Confused. The doctors say I have some memory problems from the head injury. He studied her face intently. But I remember warning you about something. About my father. Zara moved closer, keeping her voice low. You said he did this to you. That I shouldn't trust him. Marcus's expression darkened. I remember feeling afraid. Desperate. Like I'd discovered something terrible. He pressed his palms against his temples. But the details are fuzzy. Like trying to remember a dream. What do you remember about your father? About Wellington Technologies? He's been grooming me to take over the company, Marcus said, his voice gaining strength. Ever since I graduated from MIT, it's been all about preparation, learning the business from the ground up. But recently... He paused, searching for words. I started noticing things that didn't make sense. Contracts that seemed unusual. Payments to shell companies. When I tried to access certain files, I was blocked out. Zara sat on the edge of the bed, leaning forward. What kind of files? Medical research. Government contracts. Something called Project Mindbridge. His eyes sharpened with memory. I managed to hack into some of the restricted systems. What I found. He shuddered. Human experimentation. Trials on prisoners, mental health patients. People who couldn't consent or fight back. The pieces were starting to fall into place. The massive government contracts, the neural interface development, the desperate need to keep everything secret. How many people died? Zara whispered. Hundreds. Maybe more. The mortality rates were staggering, but they kept pushing forward, refining the technology. Marcus looked at her with haunted eyes. My father isn't just a tech CEO, Zara. He's a monster. We have to expose this. Get the evidence to the FBI, the media. With what evidence? The files are encrypted, locked behind multiple security protocols. And even if we could access them. Marcus gestured helplessly. Who's going to believe us against Richard Wellington? He has connections everywhere, government officials, judges, media executives. Then we find another way. There has to be someone. Footsteps in the hallway made them both freeze. Multiple people, moving with purpose toward Marcus's room. Oh God, Marcus breathed, his face going white. He's coming. I can hear his voice. Panic flashed through Zara's mind. She was trapped in a room with no other exit, about to face the man who'd already threatened her life once. Is there anything you can give me? She whispered urgently. Any proof of what you found? Marcus fumbled with the drawer of his bedside table, pulling out what looked like a small USB drive. I managed to save some files before they caught me. It's not everything, but it's a start. He pressed the device into her hand just as the footsteps stopped outside his door. Building 7, basement level, he whispered. If something happens to me, that's where you'll find the rest. The door opened, and Richard Wellington stepped inside, followed by 2 men in suits and a doctor in a white coat. Wellington's eyes immediately fixed on Zara, and she saw recognition, and fury, flash across his features. What do we have here? Wellington said, his voice dangerously calm. Miss Williams, isn't it? I thought we'd agreed you would forget about my son. Zara stood slowly, palming the USB drive. I'm a nursing student doing clinical rotations. I was just checking on patients. With no authorization, no escort, asking very specific questions about my son's condition. Wellington stepped closer, his presence filling the room like a dark cloud. I think you're here for very different reasons. Dad, leave her alone, Marcus said, but his voice was weak, uncertain. The memory gaps were real. He couldn't fully remember what he discovered or why his father was so dangerous. Marcus, you're not well, Wellington said without taking his eyes off Zara. Head injuries can cause paranoid thinking, false memories. The doctors have explained this. One of Wellington's men spoke quietly into a radio. Security to room 314. We have an unauthorized visitor. Zara's blood turned to ice. Once they had her in custody, she'd disappear just like Marcus had in that alley. The USB drive felt like it was burning a hole in her palm, evidence that could bring down Wellington Technologies, if she could get it to the right people. I should go, she said, edging toward the door. I didn't mean to intrude on a family visit. Oh, but you did intrude, Miss Williams, Wellington said smoothly. The question is why? And what exactly my son told you during your little chat? Security guards appeared in the doorway, two large men who looked more like ex-military than hospital personnel. Zara was outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options. But she wasn't going down without a fight. Marcus, she said clearly, looking directly at him despite the guns trained on her, remember what you told me. Building 7, basement level. Don't let them make you forget. Wellington's face contorted with rage. Take her. As the security guards moved toward her, Zara saw something change in Marcus's expression, a flicker of memory, of determination. Their eyes met across the room, and she saw him mouth two words, "Thank you." Then hands grabbed her arms, and she was dragged from the room into a nightmare she might never escape. But the USB drive remained hidden in her closed fist, and somewhere in the depths of Marcus's damaged memory, the truth was fighting to survive. In the security office 3 floors below, Richard Wellington watched the monitors with cold satisfaction as his men escorted Zara Williams toward the service elevator. But his expression shifted to fury as he rewound the footage, watching his son slip something to the woman just moments before they entered the room. Find out what he gave her, Wellington ordered, his voice deadly quiet. And make sure Miss Williams understands the consequences of interfering with family business. The hunt had begun, and Zara Williams was now the most dangerous woman in Detroit. If you are enjoying this video, do well to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 4. Zara had never been so grateful for the chaos of a busy emergency room. The noise, the confusion, the constant stream of patients, it all provided perfect cover as she slipped through the back corridors of Detroit General, still wearing the scrubs she'd stolen from a laundry cart at Meridian Health Center. Her escape from Wellington's security team had been nothing short of miraculous. A medical emergency on the 2nd floor, an elderly patient in cardiac arrest, had drawn most of the staff's attention, creating just enough confusion for her to slip into a supply closet and then down a service stairwell. She'd emerged in the hospital's laundry facility, where a quick change of clothes and a confident walk had gotten her past the skeleton crew of evening workers. But she knew her reprieve was temporary. Wellington's men would be looking for her, and it wouldn't take long for them to check the obvious places: her apartment, her school, her workplace. She needed somewhere safe to examine whatever Marcus had given her, somewhere with internet access and enough privacy to figure out what she was really dealing with. The Wayne State University Library was her best option. Open 24 hours during finals week, filled with stressed students who wouldn't pay attention to one more person hunched over a computer terminal. She could blend in, become invisible while she unraveled the secrets on Marcus's USB drive. The October night air bit through her thin jacket as she hurried across campus, constantly checking over her shoulder for signs of pursuit. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every car that slowed down made her heart race. But she made it to the library without incident, sliding through the glass doors into the fluorescent-lit sanctuary of academia. The 3rd floor was perfect, dimly lit, filled with individual study carrels where students could work in relative isolation. Zara chose a terminal in the back corner, as far from the main walkways as possible, and settled in with shaking hands. The USB drive felt unnaturally warm in her palm as she inserted it into the computer. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a password prompt appeared on the screen, cursor blinking expectantly. Zara stared at the empty field, her mind racing. What would Marcus have chosen? Something personal but not obvious, something his father wouldn't easily guess. She thought about their brief conversation, the haunted look in his green eyes when he talked about the company. Building 7, basement level. The phrase he'd whispered as his father arrived. She typed, Building 7 basement. The screen flashed red. Access denied. Zara tried variations, B7 basement, Building 7BL, basement 7, but nothing worked. Frustration built in her chest as precious minutes ticked by. Wellington's people could be searching for her right now, and she was stuck on a password screen. Then she remembered something else Marcus had said, Project Mindbridge. The horror in his voice when he'd spoken those words. She typed, Project Mindbridge. The screen flickered, then filled with folders and files. Zara released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding and began to explore. What she found made her stomach churn. The files were meticulously organized, each folder containing hundreds of documents, photos, and video files. Patient records, surgical notes, behavioral assessments, mortality reports. All labeled with cold, clinical precision that stripped away the humanity of the subjects involved. Subject 247, male, 34, sentenced to life without parole. Implant insertion successful. Behavioral modification protocols initiated. Subject 156, female, 28, involuntary commitment for schizophrenia. Prototype neural interface installed. Subject expired during procedure. Subject 891, male, 19, minor drug offense. Selected for Phase 3 trials. Post-surgical infection resulted in death. Page after page of human suffering, reduced to data points and statistical analysis. Zara's nursing training helped her understand the medical terminology, but it also made the reality more horrifying. These weren't just numbers, they were people. Real people who had been tortured and killed in the name of scientific advancement. She opened a folder labeled Mind Bridge Overview and found a presentation that laid out the project's goals in stark corporate language. Wellington Technologies had been contracted by a shadowy government agency to develop neural implants capable of behavioral modification and cognitive control. The applications were terrifying: soldiers who couldn't disobey orders, prisoners who could be programmed to be docile, political dissidents who could be made to forget their beliefs entirely. The technology was still experimental, but the results were promising. Early test subjects had shown significant behavioral changes within days of implantation. The implants could suppress aggressive tendencies, enhance compliance, even implant false memories. The mortality rate was high, nearly 60%, but each iteration brought improvements. Zara scrolled through surgical photos that made her nurse's stomach turn. Close-ups of open skulls, brain tissue exposed, tiny metallic devices being inserted into neural pathways. The precision was remarkable, the human cost unconscionable. But it was a folder labeled Wellington, Marcus, personal file, that made her hands tremble as she clicked it open. The truth hit her like a physical blow. Marcus hadn't been attacked in that alley. He'd been a test subject. The file contained his complete medical history, psychological profiles, and detailed surgical notes. He'd been selected for the program 6 months ago, chosen because of his access to Wellington Technologies systems and his potential value as a high-functioning test case. The implant had been designed not just to control his behavior, but to make him the perfect corporate heir, compliant, unquestioning, completely under his father's control. But something had gone wrong. Marcus had begun to resist the implant's influence, experiencing what the doctors called neural rejection syndrome. His natural personality was fighting back against the artificial behavioral modifications, creating cognitive dissonance that manifested as headaches, memory gaps, and moments of clarity where he could remember who he really was. The night she'd found him, he hadn't been running from attackers. He'd been running from his father's medical team, who had been trying to recapture him for corrective surgery. The head wound wasn't from a beating, it was from his desperate attempt to remove the implant himself, using surgical tools he'd stolen from one of Wellington's facilities. Zara stared at the screen, tears blurring her vision. Marcus had been fighting for his mind, his very identity, and she'd walked into the middle of a war he was losing. But the horror wasn't finished. She found video files labeled Live Surgical Feed and made herself watch, even as her stomach revolted. The footage showed Marcus on an operating table, unconscious, his skull open to reveal the brain beneath. A team of surgeons worked with mechanical precision, inserting a device no bigger than a quarter into specific neural pathways. The timestamp showed the surgery had taken place 3 months ago. In other videos, she watched post-surgical sessions where Marcus sat in a chair, electrodes attached to his head, while technicians ran behavioral modification protocols. His face was blank, emotionless, as voices fed him instructions through headphones. You will obey your father. You will not question company policies. You will forget what you discovered in the restricted files. But even through the drugs and technology, she could see him fighting. Tiny muscle twitches, brief moments where his eyes focused with recognition, silent tears that the technicians wiped away with clinical indifference. Zara's hands shook as she opened the final folder in Marcus's file: removal procedure, emergency protocol. The documents detailed his escape 3 days ago. He'd somehow overridden the implant's control long enough to access surgical tools and attempt self-extraction. The procedure had been crude, dangerous, but partially successful. He'd managed to remove the primary control unit, though fragments remained embedded in his brain tissue. The head wound she'd seen was self-inflicted, a desperate act of rebellion against the technology that was stealing his mind. He'd stumbled out of the facility and into the Detroit streets, bleeding and disoriented, his memories fragmented but his core personality finally free. That's when she'd found him, not a victim of random violence, but a man who had literally fought for his soul and won. But Wellington wasn't finished with him. The files contained plans for recapture and enhanced behavioral modification, using more advanced implants that would be impossible to remove. Marcus's resistance had made him valuable data, a test case for improving the technology. Zara wiped tears from her cheeks and continued reading, her horror growing with each document. The scope of Project Mindbridge was staggering: hundreds of victims across multiple facilities, all part of a program that had been running for years under various government contracts. And then she found the folder that made her blood freeze: Phase 4 Subject Selection. Her own name was at the top of the list. Williams, Zara M., age 19. Nursing student, Wayne State University. Psychological profile indicates high empathy, strong moral compass, natural leadership tendencies. Selected for advanced behavioral modification trials. Priority, high. The file contained everything: her academic records, her mother's death certificate, her financial struggles, even photos taken without her knowledge over the past several months. They'd been watching her, studying her, planning to turn her into another test subject. But it was the psychological assessment that chilled her to the bone. Subject Williams represents ideal candidate for advanced compliance testing. Her medical training and moral flexibility make her suitable for both control protocols and field testing. Recommend immediate acquisition following completion of current Phase 3 trials. Note: subject's discovery of Phase 3 test subject Wellington, M., presents opportunity for accelerated timeline. Emotional attachment to primary subject may enhance behavioral modification effectiveness. They'd been planning to use her feelings for Marcus against her. The nursing student who had stumbled across a bleeding man in an alley was about to become the next victim in a program that had already killed hundreds of people. Zara's vision blurred as the implications hit her. Her mother's death, her struggles to afford school, even her job at the hospital. How much of her life had been orchestrated by Wellington Technologies? How long had they been watching, planning, preparing to destroy her mind the same way they'd tried to destroy Marcus's? She was reaching for her phone to call someone, anyone, when footsteps echoed in the library corridor. Heavy, purposeful steps that didn't belong to a student cramming for finals. Zara quickly closed the files and ejected the USB drive, her heart hammering as she tried to look like any other student working late. But the footsteps were getting closer, and she could hear the low murmur of voices coordinating a search. They'd found her. She grabbed her bag and the USB drive, slipping away from the computer terminal as quietly as possible. The library's maze of stacks and study areas offered some cover, but she could hear them spreading out, checking each floor systematically. As she crept toward the emergency exit, one last file name flashed through her memory: Williams, Zara, Acquisition Protocol, Immediate Implementation. They weren't just looking for her. They were coming to take her. And somewhere in a medical facility across town, Marcus was trapped with no memory of the USB drive he'd given her, no knowledge that she now carried the evidence to expose everything, if she could stay alive long enough to use it. The hunt for Zara Williams had begun, and she was the only person left who knew the truth about Project Mindbridge. The weight of hundreds of lives pressed down on her shoulders as she pushed through the emergency exit into the cold Detroit night, sirens beginning to wail in the distance. The digital ghosts of Wellington's victims whispered in her mind, "Run. Fight. Remember us." She intended to do all three. If you are enjoying this video, do well to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 5. Zara had been hiding in the abandoned warehouse district for 2 days when she got the text message that changed everything. "Help me. Something's wrong. M." The number was unfamiliar, but somehow she knew it was Marcus. Her hands shook as she typed back from the burner phone she'd bought with cash at a corner store. "Where are you? Are you safe?" The response came immediately, Meridian Health Center. "They moved me to private wing. Floor 7, room 703. Can you come? I'm scared." Every instinct screamed that it was a trap. Wellington's men had been hunting her for 48 hours, checking every place she might run. Her apartment was under surveillance, her bank accounts frozen, her few friends questioned by men in expensive suits. But the desperation in that message felt real, and the USB drive burning in her jacket pocket contained evidence that Marcus was still in danger. She'd spent the last 2 days in internet cafes and libraries, using public computers to research everything she could about neural implants and behavioral modification. What she'd learned had chilled her to the bone. The technology was more advanced than she'd imagined, capable of not just controlling behavior but rewriting personality itself. And if fragments of Marcus's implant were still active? The thought drove her to make a decision that might get them both killed. Getting back into Meridian Health Center proved easier than expected. Wellington's security was focused on finding her outside the facility, not preventing her from breaking back in. She used the same nursing intern strategy, but this time with a stolen ID badge she'd lifted from a real Wayne State student. The 7th floor was different from the general medical ward where she'd found Marcus before. This was clearly the VIP section, luxury suites with marble bathrooms and views of the city, more like a high-end hotel than a hospital. The kind of place where wealthy patients could recover in privacy, away from prying eyes and uncomfortable questions. Room 703 was at the end of a quiet corridor. Zara approached carefully, every nerve on high alert for signs of surveillance or security. But the hallway was empty, and when she knocked softly on the door, Marcus's voice called out immediately. "Come in. Please." She found him sitting on the edge of a king-sized hospital bed, fully dressed in expensive clothes that made him look more like a business executive than a patient. But his face was pale, drawn with exhaustion, and his hands trembled as he looked up at her. "Zara." Relief flooded his voice. "I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't even sure the message would reach you." "I almost didn't," she admitted, closing the door behind her. "This could be a trap, I know." Marcus ran his hands through his dark hair, and she noticed a fresh bandage behind his left ear. "But I needed to see you. To tell you what's been happening to me." Zara moved closer, her nursing instincts taking over as she studied his appearance. His pupils were slightly dilated, his breathing shallow, and there was a fine tremor in his hands that suggested neurological distress. "Marcus, what did they do to you?" "They operated again," he said quietly. 3 hours after you left the other day. My father said it was necessary to repair the damage from my episode." He touched the bandage gingerly. "But something's wrong. I keep having these moments." "What kind of moments?" Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Blackouts. I'll be talking to someone, feeling normal, and then I wake up hours later with no memory of what happened. But people look at me differently afterward. Like I've said or done something terrible." Zara's blood chilled as she remembered the files from the USB drive. The behavioral modification protocols, the way the implants could override a person's natural personality and replace it with programmed responses. "Marcus, I need to tell you something about what I found on that drive you gave me." She pulled out her phone and showed him some of the photos she'd managed to take of the computer screen before fleeing the library. Marcus stared at the images, surgical diagrams, patient records, mortality statistics, with growing horror. "This is me," he breathed, pointing to a surgical photo. "This is my brain. You were a test subject for something called Project Mindbridge. Neural implants designed for behavioral control." Zara sat beside him on the bed, her voice gentle but urgent. "Marcus, I don't think they fully removed the implant. I think it's still partially active. His green eyes snapped to hers, wide with panic. That's impossible. I can feel the difference. I remember things now that I couldn't before. I remember warning you about my father, remember discovering the files. But do you remember the years before that? When your father was grooming you to take over the company? Marcus frowned, pressing his palms against his temples. It's fuzzy. Like trying to remember a movie I saw years ago. I know it happened, but the details are unclear. What's the first thing you clearly remember questioning about Wellington Technologies? The contracts. The strange payments to shell companies. That was maybe 4 months ago. Marcus looked up at her uncertainly. Why? Zara pulled up another photo on her phone, Marcus's patient file. According to this, you've been questioning company operations for over 2 years. Every time you got too close to the truth, they brought you in for behavioral adjustment. Your business trip to Europe? That was rehabilitation after you started accessing restricted files. The color drained from Marcus's face as the implications hit him. How many times? How many times did they wipe my memory? I don't know. But Marcus, I think the implant is still working. Those blackouts you're having, I think that's when the programming takes over. When you become the perfect son they designed you to be. Marcus stood abruptly, pacing to the window with agitated energy. No. No, that's not possible. I fought back. I removed the implant myself. I remember the pain, the blood. You removed part of it. But neural implants are designed to integrate with brain tissue. Fragments could still be active, especially if they're receiving remote signals. Remote signals? Marcus spun around, his expression shifting from confusion to anger. You're saying my father can still control me? Like some kind of puppet? I'm saying the technology exists. And based on what I read in those files. Marcus cut her off with a harsh laugh that made her skin crawl. You read files. Stolen files. How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know this isn't just another manipulation? Something in his tone made Zara's nursing instinct scream warnings. The tremor in his hands had stopped, his posture was straighter, more confident. His voice carried a different cadence, more formal and controlled. Marcus, she said carefully. Are you feeling all right? I feel fine, he said, but his eyes were cold now, calculating. Better than fine, actually. Clear-headed for the first time in days. This wasn't the same man who had desperately texted her for help. This was someone else wearing Marcus's face, speaking with Marcus's voice, but with none of his warmth or vulnerability. Why don't you tell me more about these files, he continued, moving closer to her with predatory grace. What exactly did you find on that USB drive? Zara's heart hammered as she realized what was happening. The implant had activated, triggered by stress or remote signal, and Marcus's natural personality was being suppressed by whatever programming his father had installed. I should go, she said, backing toward the door. You need rest. I don't think so. Marcus's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with crushing force. I think you and I need to have a very serious conversation about what you've stolen from my family. The transformation was complete. The gentle, tormented man who had risked everything to warn her was gone, replaced by something cold and efficient. She could see it in his eyes, no recognition, no affection, just clinical assessment of a problem that needed to be solved. Marcus, fight this, she pleaded. This isn't you. You're stronger than whatever they did to your brain. My name is Marcus Wellington III, he said in a monotone voice that chilled her blood. I am the heir to Wellington Technologies and future CEO of one of the most important companies in America. You are a threat to my family's interests and must be neutralized. The grip on her wrist tightened until she cried out in pain. This wasn't just behavioral modification, this was complete personality override, turning Marcus into a weapon against anyone who threatened his father's empire. Please, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I know you're in there. Remember what you told me in the alley. Remember why you gave me that drive? For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. A brief spark of recognition, of the man she'd fallen for despite the danger surrounding them both. But then it was gone, smothered by whatever technology was controlling his mind. Marcus's other hand moved to her throat, fingers positioning themselves with surgical precision over her carotid artery. His medical training, corrupted by the implant's programming, made him the perfect killer. "This will be quick," he said with terrible gentleness. "You won't suffer." Desperation flooded Zara's system as she realized she had seconds before he crushed her windpipe. Her nursing training kicked in, muscle memory from years of emergency procedures. Her free hand fumbled in her jacket pocket until she found the small vial of midazolam she'd stolen from a supply cart, a fast-acting sedative that could knock someone unconscious in minutes. She couldn't reach a syringe, but the vial had a snap-off top designed for emergency use. She bit down on the plastic cap and spat it out, then drove the open vial against Marcus's neck, pushing the plunger to inject the contents directly into his carotid artery. Marcus jerked back with a roar of rage, releasing her throat. But the sedative was already working, coursing through his bloodstream toward his brain. His movements became sluggish, uncoordinated, and the cold intelligence in his eyes flickered like a dying light bulb. "Zara," he mumbled, confusion replacing the programmed efficiency. What happened?" "My hands, there's blood under my fingernails." He was himself again, the implant's control disrupted by the sedative, but Zara knew it was temporary. Whatever technology was controlling him would reassert itself once the drugs wore off. "Marcus, listen to me," she said urgently, helping him sit on the bed as his legs gave way. "You have to fight the programming. You have to remember who you really are." "I tried to hurt you," he whispered, staring at his hands in horror. "I was going to kill you. I could feel myself doing it, but I couldn't stop. It's not your fault. The implant is still active, still receiving signals. Your father can trigger it remotely, turn you into whatever he needs you to be." Marcus looked up at her with heartbreaking clarity. "How many people have I hurt? During the blackouts, when I can't remember, how many people have I killed for him?" Before Zara could answer, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed in the hallway. Multiple people, moving with purpose toward Marcus's room. "He's coming," Marcus slurred, the sedative pulling him toward unconsciousness. "My father. He monitors everything, watches everything. He knows you're here." The footsteps stopped outside the door, and Zara heard the distinctive sound of a keycard being swiped. She looked around frantically for an escape route, but there was nowhere to run. The window was 7 floors up, the door was the only exit, and Marcus was in no condition to help her. "Zara," Marcus whispered, his eyes struggling to focus. "The drive. Whatever happens to me, get the truth out. Promise me." "I promise," she breathed, just as the door opened. Richard Wellington stepped into the room, flanked by 2 security guards and a doctor carrying a medical bag. His cold eyes took in the scene, his son slumped on the bed, Zara crouched beside him with an empty sedative vial in her hand, and his expression shifted to fury. "Miss Williams," he said with deadly calm. "I should have known you'd try to interfere with my son's treatment again." "Treatment?" Zara stood slowly, positioning herself between Wellington and Marcus. "You call torture treatment? You call mind control medicine?" Wellington's smile was reptilian. "I call it progress." Marcus has always been too emotional, too idealistic. The implant helps him focus on what's truly important, the family business, his responsibilities as my heir. His gaze shifted to his unconscious son. "Though it seems he's been experiencing some technical difficulties." The doctor moved forward with a syringe, but Zara stepped sideways to block his approach. "Don't touch him. Dr. Reeves is here to help," Wellington said smoothly. "A simple adjustment to Marcus's neural interface, and he'll be back to his normal, productive self. No more confusion, no more rebellious episodes. No more personality, you mean? No more free will. Free will is overrated, Miss Williams. Marcus is much happier when he's not fighting his destiny." Wellington nodded to his security guards. Restrain her. As the guards moved toward her, Zara made a desperate decision. She couldn't save Marcus, not now, not with Wellington's entire security apparatus surrounding them. But she could honor her promise to expose the truth. She pulled out her phone and hit the emergency broadcast button on an app she'd downloaded, streaming live video to every social media platform simultaneously. My name is Zara Williams, she said clearly, holding the phone steady despite her shaking hands. What you're about to see is Richard Wellington, CEO of Wellington Technologies, and evidence of illegal human experimentation. Wellington's face contorted with rage. Cut the feed. Now. But it was too late. The stream was live, broadcasting to thousands of viewers as the security guards tackled Zara to the ground. The phone clattered across the floor, camera still rolling as it captured Wellington standing over his unconscious son with a syringe full of neural control serum. The perfect son was about to become even more perfect, and the world was watching. If you are enjoying this video, do well to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 6. The security guard's grip on Zara's arms was like iron, but she kept her eyes fixed on her phone lying across the room, its camera light still blinking red. The live stream was broadcasting everything: Wellington's fury, Marcus unconscious on the bed, the doctor preparing another syringe with steady hands. Shut it down, Wellington barked at one of his men, who scrambled to reach the device. Too late, Zara said, tasting blood from where her lip had split when they tackled her. It's already gone viral. Thousands of people have seen your face, heard what you're doing to your own son. Wellington's cold smile never wavered as his security chief crushed her phone under his heel. Miss Williams, you clearly don't understand how the world works. I own 3 major social media platforms, have controlling interests in several others, and maintain very close relationships with government officials who oversee internet regulation. Your little broadcast will be classified as deepfake propaganda and scrubbed from existence within the hour. People will have saved it, shared it. People will forget, Wellington said with chilling certainty. They always do. Especially when presented with alternative narratives about a troubled young woman's mental breakdown and tragic obsession with my family. Dr. Reeves had finished preparing the syringe and was moving toward Marcus with clinical efficiency. The clear liquid inside caught the light, looking innocent despite its horrific purpose. Don't touch him, Zara struggled against the guard's grip. He's your son. How can you do this to your own child? Marcus is my greatest creation, Wellington replied, watching as the doctor located a vein in his son's arm. Do you think I'd let him be destroyed by sentiment? By weakness? The needle slid into Marcus's skin with practiced ease. Whatever was in that syringe would ensure the implant's programming overrode any remaining traces of his natural personality. She was watching a soul being murdered, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. You're a monster, she whispered. Wellington turned his full attention to her, and the weight of his gaze made her skin crawl. Miss Williams, before we proceed with your own treatment, I think you deserve to understand exactly how we got here. How long this has been in motion. Something in his tone made her blood freeze. What are you talking about? Your mother, of course. Diana Williams. Such a dedicated nurse, so passionate about patient care. She really thought she could expose us, poor thing. The world tilted sideways. Zara's mother had died in a medical trial when she was 12, an experimental cancer treatment that had failed despite showing promise. It had been a tragedy, but a natural one. A risk her mother had chosen to take. My mother died of cancer complications, Zara said, but her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. Your mother died because she discovered that our early behavioral modification trials were killing patients, Wellington corrected with clinical precision. She was working as a research nurse at one of our subsidiary facilities, helping to monitor test subjects. When she realized the mortality rates weren't being reported accurately, that we were deliberately concealing deaths to continue the research, she began documenting evidence. Zara's breathing became shallow, panicked. You're lying. Diana Williams was subject 001 in our first successful neural implant trial, Wellington continued relentlessly. The technology was crude then, we could only achieve basic motor control, simple behavioral modifications. But it worked well enough to make her forget what she discovered, to make her compliant while we refined the process. The guard's grip was the only thing keeping Zara upright as her legs gave way. Her mother, the woman who had raised her with such love and dedication, who had sacrificed everything for her daughter's future, turned into a lab rat by the man standing before her. The cancer was a side effect of the early implants, Wellington said with the detached interest of a scientist discussing data. Neural inflammation leading to rapid cellular mutation. We've since solved that particular problem, of course. The current generation of implants is much safer. She never had cancer, Zara breathed. You gave her cancer. Technically, the implant created conditions that led to aggressive tumor growth. But yes, in the simplest terms, we killed your mother. Wellington's smile was genuinely warm, as if he was sharing pleasant memories. She was quite remarkable, actually. Even with the behavioral modifications, some part of her kept fighting to remember, to protect you. Her final words were a warning: don't trust them. Keep Zara safe. Tears streamed down Zara's face as pieces of her childhood clicked into place. Her mother's sudden personality changes in those final months. The way she'd sometimes look at Zara with confusion, as if she couldn't quite remember who she was. The random medical appointments that never seemed to help. Why? She whispered. Why tell me this? Because, my dear girl, you need to understand that this has always been about you. Wellington moved closer, his presence radiating cold authority. Your mother's death wasn't the end of our interest in the Williams family. It was the beginning. He gestured to one of his men, who produced a thick file folder. Wellington opened it to reveal photographs, documents, and surveillance reports spanning years. Your nursing scholarship to Wayne State. Funded through a shell company controlled by Wellington Technologies. Your apartment. We own the building through a subsidiary. Your job at Detroit General. I personally recommended you to the hiring manager, who happens to sit on our board of directors. Each revelation hit Zara like a physical blow. Her entire adult life, everything she'd worked for, everything she'd achieved, it was all an elaborate setup. Your clinical rotations, your specialized training in neurology and behavioral psychology, even your friendship with certain classmates, all carefully orchestrated to prepare you for your ultimate purpose. Wellington's eyes gleamed with professional pride. You see, Miss Williams, your mother's neural structure was uniquely suited to our implants. Her brain chemistry, her neural pathways, they integrated with our technology in ways we'd never seen before. And genetic analysis suggests you've inherited those same advantageous traits. You've been planning this since I was 12, Zara said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Since you were born, actually. We began monitoring your family when your mother was pregnant with you. Diana's medical records, her psychological profiles, her genetic markers, everything indicated that her offspring would be ideal candidates for advanced neural modification. Wellington closed the file and handed it back to his subordinate. Your medical knowledge, your natural empathy, your strong moral compass, these traits make you perfect for what we call complex behavioral integration. Most subjects can only handle simple programming. But you, Miss Williams, could be turned into anything we need. A doctor who performs unethical experiments without question. A nurse who eliminates inconvenient patients. A researcher who falsifies data to support our goals. The full scope of his manipulation stretched out before her like a spider's web that had been spinning around her for years. Every choice she'd made, every path she'd taken, had been guided by invisible hands toward this moment. The fact that you discovered Marcus, that you developed feelings for him, that was the final piece of our research. We needed to understand how emotional attachments might affect implant effectiveness. Your relationship provided invaluable data. Marcus doesn't know, she said quietly. He has no idea. Marcus knows exactly what I've told him to know. His feelings for you are as artificial as everything else about his current personality. Wellington's cruelty was surgical in its precision. The romantic attachment, the protective instincts, the sexual attraction, all programmed responses designed to create the optimal testing environment. But even as he spoke, Zara remembered the moments when Marcus had fought against the implant's control. The desperate warning in the alley, the USB drive hidden despite his father's programming, the flicker of recognition when she'd sedated him. Maybe his feelings had started as artificial constructs, but something real had grown from them. Now, Wellington continued, it's time to complete the work we began with your mother. Dr. Reeves has prepared a special implant just for you, one that will let us explore the full potential of your genetic advantages. The doctor was already preparing another syringe, this one filled with what looked like liquid silver. Nanobots, Zara realized with horror. The next generation of neural control technology, delivered directly to the brain through the bloodstream. Unlike Marcus's crude surgical implant, yours will be elegant, undetectable. You'll walk out of here believing this was all a terrible misunderstanding. You'll continue your nursing career, your education, your life, but every significant decision will be ours to make. Dr. Reeves approached with the syringe, and Zara could see her death approaching in its metallic gleam. Not her physical death, but the death of everything that made her who she was. Just like her mother, she would become a puppet dancing to Wellington's strings until her usefulness ended. Any last words? Wellington asked with mock courtesy. Go to hell, Zara managed. I'm sure I will, eventually. But not today. Wellington raised his hand to signal the doctor to proceed. That's when Marcus opened his eyes. The sedative had worn off faster than expected, or maybe the implant systems had metabolized it more quickly. Either way, he was awake, aware, and looking directly at Zara with an expression she couldn't read. Ah, perfect timing, Wellington said, noticing his son's consciousness. Marcus, I want you to watch this. Your final lesson in the importance of family loyalty. But Marcus wasn't looking at his father. His gaze was fixed on Zara with burning intensity, and she could see something struggling behind his green eyes. The implant's programming warring with whatever remained of his natural personality. Wellington pulled out a small device that looked like a high-tech remote control. Let me show you what complete neural dominance looks like, Miss Williams. Marcus, activate Protocol 7. Marcus's body went rigid, his eyes rolling back briefly before refocusing with cold, mechanical precision. When he looked at Zara again, there was no warmth, no recognition, only the calculating assessment of a predator. Target acquired, Marcus said in a monotone voice that raised every hair on Zara's body. Awaiting instructions. Kill her, Wellington said simply. Use your hands. Make it slow. Marcus rose from the bed with fluid, inhuman grace. The guards released Zara's arms and stepped back, giving him room to work. She was going to die at the hands of the man she'd fallen in love with, while his father watched with scientific interest. But as Marcus moved toward her, something impossible happened. Tears began streaming down his face even as his hands reached for her throat, and she heard him whisper words that cut through the programming like a blade. I'm sorry. I can't stop myself. But I can feel everything. The implant controlled his body, but somewhere deep inside, Marcus Wellington was screaming. If you are enjoying this video, do well to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 7. Marcus's hands trembled violently as they closed around Zara's throat, his programming fighting against every instinct that screamed at him to stop. His face was a mask of agony, tears streaming down his cheeks even as his fingers found the precise pressure points that would crush her windpipe. I'm sorry, he whispered again, his voice breaking. God, Zara, I'm so sorry. She could feel his internal war and the inconsistent pressure of his grip. One moment his hands would tighten with mechanical precision, the next they would loosen as his humanity clawed its way to the surface. The implant was powerful, but it was fighting 17 years of memory, emotion, and love. Marcus, she gasped, using what little air she could draw. You're stronger than this. You're stronger than him. No. The word was torn from his throat. The programming, it's too strong. I can feel it rewriting my thoughts, making me want to hurt you. Wellington watched the struggle with clinical fascination, occasionally making notes on a tablet. Remarkable. Subject is demonstrating unprecedented resistance to Protocol 7. Note the emotional contamination interfering with execution parameters. Dr. Reeves moved closer with his silver syringe. Should I sedate the girl? Complete neural suppression would eliminate the resistance variables. Not yet, Wellington said coldly. This is valuable data. How long can emotion override programming? At what point does the implant achieve total dominance? Zara's vision began to blur as oxygen deprivation took hold, but she forced herself to think. Her nursing training, the anatomy classes, the countless hours studying neural pathways and brain function, there had to be something she could use. Marcus, she wheezed, using the last of her air. Remember, the alley. Remember choosing to trust me. For a moment, his hands loosened completely. Marcus's eyes focused with startling clarity, the programming flickering like a broken screen. I remember, he breathed. I remember everything. The experiments, the surgeries, the years of being his puppet. His gaze hardened with determination. And I remember that I love you. Impossible, Wellington snapped. The neural pathways have been completely rewritten. He shouldn't be capable of. Marcus released Zara entirely and spun toward his father, but the movement was jerky, uncontrolled. The implant was fighting back, trying to reassert control over his motor functions. His left hand spasmed, then his right, and suddenly he was convulsing as two competing sets of neural commands tore through his brain. Neural cascade failure, Dr. Reeves observed clinically. The competing commands are causing system overload. If this continues, he'll have a massive stroke. Then fix it, Wellington barked. I won't lose 17 years of investment to a software glitch. But Zara was already moving. While the guards were distracted by Marcus's seizure, she lunged for Dr. Reeves's medical bag. Her hands closed around a surgical scalpel just as Marcus collapsed to the floor, his body racked with spasms. Stay back, she warned, holding the blade steady despite her shaking hands. All of you. Wellington's security team drew their weapons, but he raised a hand to stop them. Miss Williams, you're not a surgeon. Whatever you're planning will only kill him faster. Maybe, Zara said, dropping to her knees beside Marcus. But he'll die free. Marcus's eyes rolled back, showing only whites, and bloody foam appeared at the corners of his mouth. The implant was literally burning out his neural pathways, and she could see in the monitors that his brain activity was spiking into dangerous territory. The implant, she said, more to herself than to anyone else. It's still in there, still connected to the neural pathways. If I can find it, cut it out. You'll kill him, Dr. Reeves said. Emergency neural surgery requires. I know what it requires, Zara cut him off, running her hands over Marcus's skull to find the entry point from his previous surgery. There, a slight depression behind his left ear, where the bone had been opened and resealed. And I know that if I do nothing, he dies anyway. Her fingers found the surgical markers Dr. Reeves had left on a metal tray, tools designed for precise neural work. A microscalpel, bone saw, neural probe. Not enough for proper surgery, but maybe enough to save the man she loved. Zara, Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible between convulsions. Do it. Whatever happens, it's better than this. She met his eyes, seeing love and trust despite the pain racking his body. I need you to stay very still. Can you do that for me? I'll try. Wellington stepped forward. This is madness. You have no surgical experience, no proper equipment. I have 4 years of nursing training and a lifetime of medical textbooks, Zara said grimly. And I have something you never will, I actually care if he lives or dies. She used the microscalpel to make a precise incision along the previous surgical site, following the scar tissue that marked where Wellington's butchers had opened his skull. Blood welled immediately, but she'd expected that. Head wounds always bled profusely, even minor ones. Marcus gritted his teeth as she worked, his entire body rigid with the effort of staying still. The implant was still fighting for control, sending erratic signals through his nervous system, but his love for her was stronger than the technology. The bone, she muttered, using the small bone saw to carefully widen the existing opening. I need to access the neural tissue without causing additional trauma. Her hands moved with surprising steadiness, muscle memory from countless hours of clinical practice guiding her movements. She'd assisted in enough surgeries to understand the basics, watched enough procedures to know what she was looking for. And there it was. The implant was smaller than she'd expected, a crystalline structure no bigger than a dime, threaded with hair-thin wires that disappeared into Marcus's brain tissue. It pulsed with its own light, clearly active, clearly still transmitting and receiving data. "My God," Dr. Reeves breathed. "It's beautiful." "It's an abomination," Zara corrected, using a neural probe to carefully trace the implant's connections. Some of the wires were superficial, attached to motor control centers. Others went deeper, into areas that controlled memory and personality. "If you remove those deep connections," Wellington said, his clinical interest overriding his anger, "you'll destroy everything that makes him who he is. The memories, the personality structures, everything." "You mean I'll destroy the programming you installed?" Zara shot back. "The fake personality you created to replace the real Marcus." She selected the superficial connections first, using micro-scissors to carefully cut the wires attached to motor functions. Each severed connection caused Marcus to jerk once, then relax as the implant's control over that part of his body ceased. "Zara," he said, his voice stronger now. "I can feel it letting go. The pressure in my head is easing." But the deeper connections were more challenging. These wires were integrated with actual neural tissue, grown into his brain over months of careful cultivation. Removing them improperly could cause massive hemorrhaging, permanent brain damage, or death. "You need to trust me," she told him, positioning the probe near a cluster of deep connections. "This might hurt." "I trust you," he replied without hesitation. The first deep wire came free with a wet snapping sound, and Marcus screamed. Blood flowed more freely now, and the monitors showed dangerous spikes in his vital signs. But she couldn't stop. Each connection she severed brought him closer to freedom. "His blood pressure is dropping," Dr. Reeves observed with professional detachment. "Heart rate becoming irregular. You're killing him." Zara ignored him, focusing entirely on the delicate work of liberation. 2 more deep connections, then 3. Marcus's screams had subsided to whimpers, then to an ominous silence that terrified her more than any sound. "Marcus," she called softly. "Stay with me." No response. The monitors showed flatlining brain activity. "He's gone," Wellington said with satisfaction. "You've murdered my son." But Zara wasn't finished. The implant's core was still intact, still pulsing with malevolent light. She wrapped her fingers around it and pulled, feeling the final connections tear free from Marcus's brain tissue. The moment the implant came free, something extraordinary happened. The crystalline structure began broadcasting a flood of data, not just Marcus's vital signs and neural patterns, but everything it had recorded over the years. Conversations, thoughts, emotions, memories. All of it transmitted in real time to receivers somewhere in Wellington's network. "It's been recording everything," Zara breathed, staring at the device in her palm. "Every word we've said, every plan we've made. You've been listening to all of it." Wellington's smile was triumphant. "Did you really think I would put a control device in my son's brain without ensuring it could provide useful intelligence? That implant has been my window into his mind for 3 years. I know every conversation you've had, every feeling you've shared, every strategy you've planned." The full scope of their surveillance hit her like a physical blow. The USB drive, the evidence she'd gathered, her plans to expose Wellington Technologies, he'd known about all of it from the moment Marcus first spoke to her. "Including your touching conversation about Building 7's basement level," Wellington continued. "My security teams are already en route to secure any remaining evidence." Outside the medical facility, sirens were wailing. Not ambulances, military vehicles, by the sound of it. Wellington had called in his government contacts, turning this into a matter of national security. "You're trapped, Miss Williams. No evidence, no escape route, no witnesses." Wellington gestured to his men. "Dr. Reeves, please prepare Miss Williams for her procedure. It's time to complete her transformation." But as the doctor approached with his silver syringe, Marcus's hand suddenly gripped Zara's wrist. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused but alive. "The implant," he whispered weakly. Is it gone?" "It's gone," she confirmed, tears of relief streaming down her face. "You're free." Marcus smiled, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "Then we can still win." The implant, it was broadcasting to them, but it was also receiving. "And I know their frequencies." Even dying, even after brain surgery performed with primitive tools in a hostile environment, Marcus was thinking 3 steps ahead. The implant hadn't just been a window into his mind, it had been a gateway into Wellington's entire neural control network. And now they had the key. If you are enjoying this video, do well to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 8. The neurosurgeon at Detroit General looked grim as she emerged from the operating room, her scrubs stained with blood and exhaustion etched in every line of her face. Zara rose from the waiting room chair where she'd been sitting for the past 6 hours, her heart hammering against her ribs. "He's alive," Dr. Sarah Chen said without preamble. "But I need to prepare you for what's coming." 3 days had passed since Marcus's emergency surgery at Meridian Health Center. The FBI had raided the facility within hours of Zara's desperate 911 call, finding Wellington and his team attempting to destroy evidence while Marcus lay bleeding on the floor. The implant in Zara's palm had become the key to everything, not just proof of the neural control technology, but a gateway into Wellington's entire network. "The damage?" Zara asked, though she already knew the answer wouldn't be good. "Extensive neurological trauma. The implant's removal caused significant hemorrhaging in areas controlling memory formation and retrieval. He's suffered what we call retrograde amnesia. He's lost approximately 5 years of memories, possibly more." Zara closed her eyes, absorbing the blow. The Marcus who had fought for his freedom, who had risked everything to expose his father's crimes, who had whispered words of love in stolen moments, that man was gone, erased by the very act that had saved his life. "But his core personality remains intact," Dr. Chen continued. "His fundamental knowledge, his moral framework, his capacity for forming new memories, all of that is undamaged. He's still Marcus Wellington. He just doesn't remember becoming the man you fell in love with." "Can I see him?" "He's been asking for you. Though I should warn you, he's confused about your relationship. In his mind, you're a stranger who saved his life." The walk to Marcus's room felt like a funeral march. Everything they'd shared, every moment of connection, every whispered promise, all of it had been burned away by the implant's removal. She was about to meet the man she loved as if for the first time. Marcus was sitting up in bed, staring out the window at the Detroit skyline. He looked younger somehow, the weight of years of programming and trauma lifted from his shoulders. When he turned to see her, his green eyes held curiosity but no recognition. "You're Zara," he said, his voice careful and formal. "The nurse who saved my life." "Yes," she managed, her throat tight with unshed tears. "How are you feeling?" "Confused. The doctors tell me I've lost several years of memory, that I was the victim of some kind of experimental surgery performed by my own father." He studied her face intently. "They also tell me that you risked everything to help me, though they won't explain why." Zara sat in the chair beside his bed, choosing her words carefully. "You asked me to help you. You said your father couldn't be trusted. And you believed me? A complete stranger bleeding in an alley? You seemed genuine. In pain, but honest." She met his gaze. "I'm glad I listened." They talked for an hour, Marcus asking careful questions about the past few days while FBI agents waited outside his door. The implant Zara had removed was being analyzed by federal technicians, its data revealing the scope of Wellington's crimes. But it had also revealed something much larger and more terrifying. Agent Patricia Reyes briefed them that evening, her expression grave as she spread classified documents across Marcus's hospital table. "Wellington Technologies is just one node in a network we're calling the Prometheus Group," she explained. "At least 17 companies worldwide, all conducting illegal human experimentation under various government contracts. We're talking about thousands of victims across 6 countries. Marcus studied the organizational charts with the analytical mind that had survived his neural trauma. My father was just middle management. High-level middle management, but yes. The real architects of this program are still out there, and they're already moving to protect themselves. 3 facilities have been evacuated in the past 12 hours, all evidence destroyed. What about the other victims? Zara asked. The people still trapped in these programs? That's where we need your help, Agent Reyes replied. Both of you. Marcus, your access to Wellington's systems could help us identify other facilities. And Zara, your medical background could be crucial in helping victims recover from neural modification. But even as they planned their next moves, the network was striking back. Richard Wellington was found dead in his cell the morning before his arraignment, an apparent suicide by hanging, though the ligature marks suggested otherwise. His death made front-page news, but it also eliminated the prosecution's key witness. He knew too much, Agent Reyes explained grimly. Someone wanted him silenced before he could implicate the others. Wellington's suicide might have ended one chapter, but it opened another. His will, filed just hours before his death, transferred complete control of Wellington Technologies to Marcus, along with an encrypted hard drive containing what lawyers called comprehensive documentation of past research initiatives. He's giving you the keys to the kingdom, the FBI's tech specialist explained as they examined the drive's contents. Financial records, facility locations, personnel files, research data. Everything you'd need to shut down the entire network. Marcus stared at the screen, his face pale. Why would he do that? Even in death, why would he help destroy his life's work? Maybe, Zara suggested quietly, some part of him still loved his son. Maybe this was his way of asking for forgiveness. The next months blurred together in a whirlwind of congressional hearings, international investigations, and careful medical work with implant victims. Marcus proved to be a natural leader despite his memory loss, using his inherited wealth and corporate connections to systematically dismantle the Prometheus network. Zara found her calling in victim recovery, developing protocols to identify and treat neural modification survivors. Working together, they helped expose 17 facilities across 6 countries. Over 400 victims were identified and rescued, though many bore permanent psychological and neurological damage. The international scandal led to new laws governing neural research and the establishment of a global monitoring agency. But the work was far from over. The Prometheus group was just the beginning, Marcus said one evening as they reviewed files in their shared office. These techniques, this technology, it's too valuable for governments and corporations to abandon completely. We've won a battle, not the war. They'd grown closer over the months, their shared mission creating bonds that transcended Marcus's lost memories. He couldn't remember falling in love with her, but he was falling in love with her again, slowly, carefully, building something new on the foundation of their common purpose. Sometimes I wonder, he said quietly, what we were to each other before. The doctors say we had some kind of relationship, but they won't give me details. Zara looked up from her laptop, meeting his questioning gaze. We cared about each other. We trusted each other. Beyond that. She shrugged, a small smile playing at her lips. I think we should focus on who we are now, not who we were then. And who are we now? Partners. Friends. People who've seen the worst of what humans can do to each other, and decided to fight back. Marcus nodded, but she could see something deeper in his eyes, a recognition that transcended memory, a soul-deep knowledge that they belonged together regardless of what his damaged brain could or couldn't recall. 2 years later. The Marcus and Diana Williams Foundation occupied a converted mansion in the hills outside Detroit, its serene grounds providing sanctuary for victims of illegal experimentation. Zara stood in the garden, watching Marcus work with a group of survivors who were learning to trust their own thoughts again after years of neural manipulation. His memory had never returned, the neurological damage was too extensive. But he'd built a new life from the fragments that remained, creating something beautiful from the ashes of his father's crimes. The foundation had helped over 1,000 victims worldwide, providing medical care, legal support, and most importantly, proof that recovery was possible. Dr. Williams? A young voice interrupted her thoughts. One of their newest residents, a teenage girl rescued from a facility in Eastern Europe, approached hesitantly. "Just Zara," she corrected gently. The PhD in neural psychology had come later, earned through late-night study sessions between foundation work. "What can I do for you, Anna?" "I wanted to thank you. For the first time in 3 years, I had a dream that was actually mine. Not something they programmed into my head." Zara felt the familiar tightness in her throat that came with these moments. Each recovered memory, each act of independent thought, each dream that belonged to its dreamer, these were the victories that made everything worthwhile. "That's wonderful," she said. "Hold on to that feeling. It's yours, and no one can ever take it away again." As Anna walked back toward the house, Marcus appeared at Zara's side. His hair was shot through with premature gray now, a side effect of the neural trauma, but his eyes held peace she'd never seen in their early days together. "Good day?" he asked, slipping his arm around her waist with the casual intimacy of long partnership. "Very good." Anna had her first real dream. The mind healing itself. It's remarkable what people can recover from, given time and support. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the grounds where dozens of survivors were learning to be human again. Zara wore a simple gold band on her left hand. They'd married 6 months ago in a quiet ceremony attended only by friends and fellow survivors. Marcus couldn't remember proposing to her twice, once in the hospital, once after his memory loss, but he'd insisted the ring match one he'd apparently bought years earlier, found in a safe deposit box along with a letter he'd written to himself about loving her. "Any word from Agent Reyes?" Marcus asked. 3 more facilities identified, 2 in Asia and 1 in South America. The network is shrinking, but it's not dead yet. It may never be completely dead. But that doesn't mean we stop fighting. Zara leaned into his warmth, drawing strength from their shared determination. They'd both lost so much, her mother, his memories, years of their lives to Wellington's machinations. But they'd gained something too, a purpose larger than themselves, a love forged in the crucible of shared trauma and common cause. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Giving up the memories?" "Sometimes I wonder if the Marcus from before would have made different choices." "Never," he replied without hesitation. "The man I was before was trapped, controlled, programmed to be someone else's puppet. I may not remember our first meeting, our first kiss, our first, 'I love you,' but every day I get to discover new reasons to love you. Every day I get to choose this life, this work, this us. That's worth any memory." In the distance, the foundation's bell tower chimed the hour, calling residents to dinner. Soon the dining hall would fill with survivors from a dozen countries, speaking a dozen languages, but united by their refusal to let their tormentors define them. They were living proof that the human spirit could survive any attempt to break it, that love and purpose could grow from the darkest soil. As they walked back toward the house hand in hand, Zara thought about her mother, the real Diana Williams, the nurse who had tried to expose the truth and died for her courage. The foundation bore her name not just because of their marriage, but because her sacrifice had planted the seeds for everything they'd built. The truth had set them free, just as Marcus had promised in those desperate moments when she'd held his damaged brain in her hands. But more than that, their shared commitment to that truth had given them something neither Wellington nor his network could touch, a love that transcended memory, a purpose that transcended profit, and a future built on the unshakable foundation of human dignity. Behind them, the mansion glowed with warm light and the sound of healing voices. Ahead lay years of work, of fighting, of helping others reclaim what had been stolen from them. But they would face it together, and that made all the difference. If you are enjoying this video, do well to like this video and subscribe to this channel.